My name's Eugene Weir. I'm a restoration project manager for the Freshwater Trust. I've lived here in the Rogue Basin, Bear Creek Valley for about 25 years, and 20 of those years I've spent studying and working on the restoration of Bear Creek, both for water quality and wildlife habitat values. Today we're talking a little bit about wetland setbacks, and I wanted to share my perspective on that based on some of the things that I've learned here working in Bear Creek. Bear Creek is Southwest Oregon's most urbanized water body, and at one time it was one of the most impaired water bodies in the state of Oregon. It is now considered one of the most improved water bodies in the state of Oregon, largely because of conservation practices that have been going on for the last couple of decades that have really resulted in improved conditions in the creek. However, this stream faces a challenge that many streams throughout Oregon and the Pacific Northwest face. It's warming up, and it is warming up because of land changes, mostly loss of riparian habitat, and connectivity to its floodplain, where it gains the water that actually helps to sustain that riparian habitat. So when we think about wetland resources, they're often on the edge of the floodplain. They're sometimes disconnected from the stream in the sense that fish cannot swim into them. But hydrologically, they are still connected to the stream. Many of them discharge water through surface connections to the stream, and others discharge water hydrologically through the ground to the stream. One of the tremendous benefits of that water from these wetlands, which are often formed by seeps and springs, is that water creates cold water pockets on Bear Creek. And that's one of the main things that's allowed salmon and steelhead to persist in a stream like Bear Creek over the years, despite its warming trend. So fish are able to move through warm water, but they can find cold water pockets to rest in. And that's a really important aspect of sustaining their populations in this stream now and going forward, especially as we think about climate change. So when we think about our wetland resources, even when they're not connected directly to the stream course or what we think of as the riparian corridor, they're still playing an important role in benefiting water quality and fish habitat in the main stream itself. But there's a lot of other reasons to protect these wetlands and create setbacks around them. Even when fish are not accessing the wetland directly, the food that fish eat is also growing here. So things like damselflies and dragonflies, they're large food items for fish and for birds. They're mostly growing in still water environments off the stream channel. So wetlands produce food for our wildlife, both aquatic and terrestrial. Wetlands also are a place where vegetation, native vegetation, can be sustained because there's year-round water there. That native vegetation that likes water, it's what we think of as riparian vegetation, provides a lot of benefits for fish and wildlife. It shades the water, keeping it cool. That improves the water quality. The roots filter the water, removing surface pollution that gets into these waterways as it runs off of our built environment. So these wetlands are providing filtration for water that's coming off the environment around here, and that native vegetation is helping that filtration process take place. Birds, bees, a myriad of wildlife live in these forests and surrounding vegetation. And when things like birds come to feed in these wetlands on dragonflies and other things, they eat the fruit of those plants, and the seeds are transported back into the stream corridor by those birds and other wildlife. That has a real big benefit to the stream corridor, because when we get wiped out by a fire or a flood, that seed source that comes from off the stream can actually be an important part of repopulating the stream with native vegetation that's appropriate for it. So these become sort of source areas, and being off the main course of the stream, they're less likely to be disturbed by floods in particular. So they become source areas, not only for the food that wildlife eat, but for the seeds that enable the forest to regrow to a healthy native standpoint. Our organization supports the establishment of policy and code that protects freshwater resources. In a built environment, an urban setting like the Bear Creek corridor, human encroachment, built environment, impervious surfaces, there's a lot more of them than there ever were before, and they're squeezing in on our floodplain. By adopting code that protects wetlands, that are off channel and typically not thought of as the true riparian corridor, we're extending that filtration, that absorption, and our ability to actually manage flood flows in the future within the Bear Creek corridor itself. These pockets of wildlife habitat, of diversity, are beautiful to look at. They're things that we can enjoy. They're assets in our community. And they are also vitally important in sustaining the cold water fish and the native wildlife that we so love in this environment and that we walk the Greenway to enjoy. We want to see those birds and those pollinators in our towns. We need to create habitat for them. So these pockets are very supportive of all those values that we are really looking for in our community. They're places where we can go and enjoy the environment, even in our built environment. Wetlands that are incorporated into our communities, when they're cared for and stewarded, become a real asset to the community. Because we all enjoy the shops, the businesses, walking to town, to restaurants, but we also, our eyes are drawn to open spaces, to natural areas, to greenness. And when we have a mix of community-built environment mixed with environment that is ecosystems that's functioning, that looks healthy, that's attracting native wildlife, then we're really getting the best of both. And that makes for an attractive community. That's the kind of place I want to live, and probably the kind of place you want to live too.
Right now, the City of Phoenix considers this little piece of wet land unsuitable for development, a liability. However, this spring-fed wetland is an integral part of Bear Creek, and Bear Creek links Ashland, Medford, Talent, Phoenix, and Central Point. So that's a lot of the Rogue Valley. We've experienced in a brutal way how it linked us when the fire tore through the non-native blackberries, spreading up the Greenway from city to city. The creek and its corridor is important to all of us. Eugene Weir describes so well how the riparian zones and wetlands contribute to the people, wildlife, fish, water quality, and hydrology. Each city plays a part in its restoration. Therefore, this is not just a Phoenix issue. This is a Rogue Valley issue. And good, strong setback ordinances are the responsibilities of every city along its borders. There are some good models in place already. As Phoenix rebuilds from the fire in a time of ongoing drought and changing climate, it can either look at economic development or setbacks, or it can look at economic development and setbacks. This is an opportunity to collaborate with other cities along Bear Creek and plan ahead to avoid future oversights. That's what makes this little wetland and ones along Bear Creek in other cities real assets and not liabilities. And that's why we urge the City Council to expand setbacks on the unnamed streams in the Phoenix part of the Bear Creek watershed, including this wetland at the entrance to Blue Heron Park.
My name's Marcia Carino. I'm a Phoenix resident, and I support the riparian setbacks on the wetland at the Blue Heron Park.
We understand that taking a wetland that has been neglected for a bit and restoring it to a healthy wetland could be a multi-year project. However, we think that it's worth the time and effort because a functional wetland benefits the community of Phoenix and the future generations of the Rogue Valley. Educators who bring their students for outdoor learning activities could very well stimulate interest in the sciences, literature, art, and other disciplines. And the market values of properties that are near or within viewing of wetlands are often greater than the values of similar properties without wetlands. Phoenix has some big developments coming, and some of those are within immediate proximity to wetlands. By adopting the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's recommendations to expand riparian setbacks to include the, as of now, unnamed wetlands, streams, and waterways, before the sale of the Blue Heron parcel is finalized on February 28, 2022, Phoenix City leaders have the opportunity to be visionaries and to join with other cities around the world by protecting this precious water source that is so unique to this area that we live in.
My name is Scott English, and I reside in Ashland. I am speaking tonight to offer my volunteer support to Save the Phoenix Wetland and to the ODFW letter sent to the Council, which recommended a Class 2 25-foot riparian buffer for the Blue Heron Wetland and Class 1 50-foot riparian buffer for the two other waterways. The ODFW basis for riparian buffer recommendations was the lack of protection and documented presence of salmon and steelhead in two of the unnamed tributaries and the historical fish presence data for the Blue Heron Wetland. My field of expertise is aquatic habitat restoration, and over the last 40 years I've been involved in numerous stream and wetland restoration projects throughout Oregon and other states, including the Blue Heron Wetland and the wetland behind the Phoenix Civic Center. Last week, the Blue Heron Wetland and proposed RV property was mapped utilizing a photographic drone which incorporated 3D LiDAR and high-resolution cameras. The focus of the map is to identify the spring source, which is over next to Highway 99, and the adjoining connected wetland, which basically follows this black outline here. The outlet of the wetland that passes underneath the access road to Blue Heron Park. The top of bank is displayed here. This is the high bank. So that would form the northern edge of the proposed riparian buffer. The southern edge follows the 25-foot offset, which basically results in a 25-foot buffer that is approximately 1/4 of an acre in size. The proposed development for the RV park encompasses tax lots 7,500 and tax lots 7,400. The entire area of the proposed development follows this outline here and is in the southern portion south of the buffer. The 25-foot buffer would fit the Class 2 riparian setback recommended by ODFW, and as you can see from the map, the buffer is strategic in that it protects the jurisdictional wetland from potential impacts from the proposed RV park development. These impacts could include, number one, pollutants from sheet flow, storm runoff, and other sources may carry nutrients and sediments into the wetland which impact water quality. Number two, thermal warming of the wetland waterway flowing into Bear Creek from the lack of riparian shade. Climate change means increasing higher temperatures and thermal warming becoming even more critical to water quality and its impacts to fish, wildlife, and people. Number three, negative impacts to young salmon and steelhead are attributed to high water temperatures and lack of protective buffers and riparian shading. The Class 2 25-foot buffer, approximately 1/4 acre in size, has the potential to provide the necessary buffer width that can be restored and planted with fast-growing trees, shrubs, and grasses that can filter out pollutants and provide the critical thermal cover needed to keep water temperatures cool. Less than 1/4 of an acre for a buffer seems like a very reasonable request to the city for long-term investment to help protect a natural resource that is part of the Building Back Phoenix. I urge the Council to adopt the ODFW recommendations and set aside the 25-foot buffer as part of the Class 2 riparian setback ordinance for Blue Heron Waterway and Class 1 buffer for the other two tributaries. Thank you.